It is amazing how time flies, and thank you for the beautiful song as well. And I think it actually makes a nice transition from baby dedication up to a talk about a book of Revelation that we are going to explore. And so I just want to check if we've got a presentation for it. That will probably come in a second, but it doesn't matter. There's just 12 slides. They're a bit complicated, but we'll have a look at it and let's see how far we can go on it. So I want you to imagine for a moment that we could slip through history and we find ourselves in Bethlehem. And you might say to me, this is the wrong time of the year for it. We're just headed to summer, not winter, because usually we tell this story in December. Because what happens in Bethlehem on a sacred night, picture yourself standing quietly, and you can imagine this music, Silent Night. Okay, I won't sing. I need to do some singing classes. And in the shadows you stand there and you watch Mary and Joseph tenderly cradling their newborn baby, and the air is thick with awe and anticipation. Angels are whispering. The heavens, angels are whispering in the heavens. Shepherds hurry from the hills. Wise men are traveling under starlit skies somewhere. Somewhere in the background, King Herod is jealous because he heard that there's a king, somebody who's going to become a king. And there's some jealousy that happens, and you know that there's a sense of danger, and it stirs in the distance. But in the middle of all of this, there's a vulnerable little baby, not very different from little Tyler that we had here today. And he rests in a manger, and heaven holds its breath and proclaims good news to the world. Okay, so that scene has actually inspired many people to create what they call a nativity. Have you seen the little nativity scenes and things? People can actually collect them. If you come to Aberdeen in December and you go to the park just around the corner, the churches get together and they recreate this beautiful nativity scene that talks about the times that might have happened. But let's go to Revelation chapter 12. And in Revelation 12, you're going to see that there's a different nativity scene. It's told in a different tone of voice. If you, again, I wish I had Elder Victor's musical knowledge, but you know, sometimes you can have, is it major chords? Major chords are the clear music that has a beautiful tune that you can just follow and just sing, and then you've got what they call minor chords. Have you heard about minor chords? Kind of sound just a little bit off tune. It sounds a little bit dangerous. It sounds a little bit as though it doesn't work. But it also, it tells a story. It creates an atmosphere. And so in Revelation 12, have you ever thought about it, that we have another nativity scene? And we read it during our scripture reading. The scene, this time, it's not such a quiet night in Bethlehem. A great sign appears in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and under her head there's a crown of 12 stars, and she is crying out in agony as in childbirth. I can't, I don't know if Katrina even remembers what it was like to give birth to a little baby. Was it easy, or was it hard work? Was it something like, why did you do this to me, Aidan? Take it back. I don't want to let it come out. The pain of childbirth can be, they say there's no pain. I can't say that I have the experience. And then another sign appears, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. And what does it want to do? It wants to... I was tempted, should I tell this as a children's story? But then the children will have problems sleeping at night because this dragon wants to eat this child. But just before the dragon can get to the child, what happens? The child gets snatched up into heaven, and we breathe a sign of relief because he's up in the throne of God. Matthew, the book of Matthew, shows us Herod. Revelation, what it does is it pulls away the curtain and it shows us that there is actually another force behind Herod, the big dragon that we might be able to find. Luke shows us the little baby in swaddling cloths, but Revelation shows us the child on a big cosmic stage. And the word cosmic over here means that we're not only looking at a small environment, but we're looking at the meaning of the whole of history and everything that takes place. And on this cosmic stage, there is this serpent-like creature, the devil or Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. So, and you might say, why do these chapters matter for us? Well, I actually think it's really important for us to know that Revelation isn't just about details and facts, but it actually wants to tell us something that is important for our ordinary lives as well. Because in our lives, we also experience pressure and we experience confusion and spiritual conflict. We live in that pressure every week. They tell us that behind the headlines, behind the confusion of our age, and even behind all the private battles with shame and fear and compromise, there is a furious dragon who knows his time is short, and there is a lamb that has already conquered. I wonder if you've watched the news this week. There was a bit of a spat between two very important people, well-known people in the world. The one, and definitely not a guy called Keir Starmer, but a guy called Donald Trump on the one side, and he's got a friend called J.D. Vance. You remember them? Heard about them somewhere? And then there's this guy called Pope Leo the 14th, and Pope Leo stated something, and the next day on Truth Social came this picture of that Donald Trump posts. It almost looks like a Seventh-day Adventist picture of Jesus coming from the clouds, but of course it just looks like Donald Trump. And at the bottom of it, there's sick people and stuff. And very quickly, the whole of America got angry with Donald Trump, a Christian America. They said, "No, this doesn't work. Remove it." And he removed it, and later he said he thinks that he tried to show himself as a doctor for where it can be. You remember that? But somehow something says to me that the symbols that are used match our experience and our reality that we read about in that you've got these big powers in the world that are somehow working together to try to bring changes and manipulate people and cause conflict and pretend to resolve conflict, and we can see the pictures of Revelation just becoming very real in our lives. But what does Revelation tell us? Revelation says that there will always be a dangerous alliance between political beasts and religious voices, and they may look like lamb-like while they speak like dragons. And the question for us as a church is, we don't want to ask which earthly power will save us, because we already know that answer. But the question is, whose voice will we trust? Who will we trust? And so as we move on in this story of Revelation chapter 12, I think Revelation 12 and 13 really help us to understand this conflict between good and evil that takes place. And amazingly, as this conflict is building up, because the book of Revelation just talks about one conflict after the other, and in chapter 12 and 13 it really gets quite intense, but we already start seeing that things are swinging in a different direction, because on the one hand there's conflict and trouble, but on the other hand there's a child that gets snatched up to the throne of God, and we know that maybe there's a sign of hope. And what happens to the dragon? The dragon is thrown down from heaven. The dragon fails to destroy the child, and in the middle of all of this, heaven erupts in song. Now, I want to talk about song. I think I spoke about it last time as well, how important singing is in the book of Revelation. Again, just to think about this week, there was a big election that happened somewhere in Europe this week. Can you remember in which country? Hungary. And on the night before the election, there was a huge concert in the middle of the city. And everybody that was going to vote against the government the next day were listening to music, and they were singing it. I find it amazing how music just has this way of presenting a sense of resistance and against the forces of power. And so John says, here comes this beautiful song. It says, now has come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. And what does the song, the words of the song says, for the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down. And listen to what the dragon does. Those words, accusers, we'll talk about that. He accuses them before God day and night. But what did they do? They triumphed over him with the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And we're going to try to unpack that a little bit. Did you notice what Satan has been doing in heaven? While the four living creatures sing, holy, 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 Satan says of us, guilty, guilty, guilty. The devil he's our accuser. He points to our failures and our compromises, our shame, our record, our weakness. But when Christ returns to the throne victorious, the accuser is cast down. So the message from this for me and for you is, I think, it means that in the great battles of Revelation, it is not only out there in history, but it is here in my life as a believer, because the dragon is accusing me in my life as well. I often walk, Weiers, you could have done better. Weiers, you made a mistake. You forgot to do this. You forgot to do that. You are a failure. You will never change. God must be tired of you by now. But what does Revelation 12 say? It says that voice of the accuser has been thrown down. Your life is not defined by the enemy's accusations, but what is our life defined by? By the blood of the Lamb and by the word of Christ's testimony. So what accusation has been loudest in your life this week is the question. Let's name it in front of God, and then let's answer it with the words of Scripture. The accuser has been thrown down. The Bible says, the song says, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. That is why the church can sing, even in a world of dragons, we will overcome someday. By the way, that song, have you heard the song? We shall overcome. It was actually written by about more than 100 years ago. It became very famous in the 1960s in America when people started singing, we shall overcome. And in South Africa, in my country, it became one of those anthems that was being sung whenever there was a political rally, that we will overthrow apartheid and we will overcome the forces of the evil. Both, but it was written more than 100 years ago by somebody called Charles Albert Tindley. And the original words of that song is actually written, I shall overcome. And I wish I could play the song for you. I couldn't find a version that and I knew I was going to be out of time, so I'd go and look it up on YouTube. But the second verse of that song says, both seen and unseen powers join to drive my soul astray, but with his word, a sword of mine, I will overcome someday. This is what Charles Tindley writes. It's a beautiful song that you can hear with so much power and strength. We can sing because the Lamb has already conquered. So let's quickly move to chapter 13. I'm so aware of time, and but the war is not over yet. So in chapter 12, there's this dragon, and it gets snatched away, and there's the sense that there's going to be an overcoming because there's a song. But now we see another battle that appears in Revelation chapter 13. Revelation says that the dragon, the same dragon that we saw, comes down with great wrath because he knows that his time is short. And having failed to destroy the child, he now turns against the woman and the rest of her offspring. And who is this woman? I think it's God's church. Am I correct? Yes. And this is where Revelation 13 opens up the next scene. The dragon stands by the sea, and it summons two allies. Okay, so you've got the dragon on the one hand, and then the next thing that happens, this big beast comes out. From where does the beast come? From the sea. From the sea. By the way, in Revelation, the sea usually represents nations. It represents the many peoples of the world. So there's the one beast that comes up from the sea, and then there's another beast that comes up from the earth. And biblical scholars in recent years have actually discovered that these three, so you've got the dragon, you've got the sea beast, and you've got the land beast, they form what you would call a counterfeit trinity. You've got, so the dragon would be the father. He's the one who calls people together. He's got strength. The sea beast counterfeits the son, and we'll have a look at that. And the land beast counterfeits the Holy Spirit. And so, now as Seventh-day Adventists, we have traditionally and always usually read these chapters with a historicist lens. Now that's a big word. Let's have a quick look at the sea beast in a historical framework. So that means that we don't see these symbols as applying only to one brief moment in time or in the future or only to the first century. We see that this conflict unfolds over a period of time of the church and through the ages of empire and persecution and on to the final crisis over worship and allegiance. So, and we don't need to unpack every date and every chart this morning, but it matters to say clearly that these beasts are not just vague symbols of evil. They actually describe real historical powers and recurring patterns through which the dragon works. So the sea beast especially evokes a long period of persecution, compromise during a time when Christendom, the word Christendom, by the way, is a very loaded word. It says that Christianity has become dominant. Can you hear that? Christendom? Christianity is in charge, is in control. By the way, when Christianity is in charge and control, you should expect that things can go wrong as well. Have you heard about it? If power corrupts, okay? Can you remember who said that? That was George Orwell. And he says, absolute power corrupts absolutely for where we can be. So even Christianity, when it gets in charge, it can be in charge. Here is something interesting that I wonder if you've known. So 42 months is how long the sea beast is in charge. And if you take 42 months and you multiply it by 12, you get to, 42 months by days, by 30 days, you get to about 1,260 days in Scripture, in prophetic days. And if you actually read the book of Daniel, you realize that there's another reference to that as well. But it's a symbolic period of oppression and counterfeit religion. But have a look at the land beast as well. The land beast points us to a later kind of lamb-like power that it speaks softly, and eventually it begins to speak like the dragon. In other words, John saw a story that stretches from his own day with the sea beast through church history and into the last movements of history. So just to go back to the sea beast, the sea beast, it comes out of the water and it actually tries to mimic Jesus. It almost looks like Jesus. Why? Because it has a fatal wound that is healed. You remember Jesus died and Jesus was resurrected. It exercises authority for 42 months. 42 months, have you actually calculated how much that is in years? It is 3.5 years. If you work at how long was Jesus on earth? 3.5 years. But instead of acting like a good shepherd, this sea beast, the good shepherd, he wipes away tears. This beast, he just speaks blasphemies and makes war on the saints. Now the land beast, on the other hand, this one is even more deceptive because John says it looks like a lamb, but how does it speak? Like a dragon. And the Bible actually regularly talks about things like this. It says, be careful of people who come across as very soft-spoken, but behind you they are wolves that's dressed in sheep's clothing, in a way. It performs signs and wonders. It even calls down fire from heaven in order to deceive. It pushes the world towards worship of the first beast. So the frightening thing about Revelation 13 is that evil rarely appears wearing a sign that says evil. It always comes masquerading as something else. It looks awesome, but the land beast looks lamb-like. It has religious language. It uses pious words. It may sound moral, patriotic, reassuring, protective, but the real question is not how it looks. The real question is what kind of voice does it have? Does it sound like Jesus or does it sound like the dragon? And I wonder if there's a spiritual lesson for us over there, because when we need to decide what is important in our lives, do we listen for the voice? Can we hear Jesus' voice? Or do we hear a voice of danger and anger, etc.? So I know that I'm going through quite a lot of details quite fast, but so there's a danger that the sea beast and the land beast, the spiritual powers, but also this soft voice, this dragon-like beast that tries to do miracles and things, can get themselves entangled. And whenever you find that political power and spiritual power kind of mix with each other, I think we've got a dangerous situation. So whether it is a president rebuking a pope, or a pope rebuking a president, or churches aligning themselves with whichever strong man seems to be most useful, Revelation teaches Christians not to be dazzled by power. Our loyalty cannot rest in any human ruler, left or right in the political spectrum, secular or religious. It belongs to the Lamb that was slain. So let's quickly look at how do you know, how do the people who follow the beast get identified in Revelation? The Bible in chapter 13, it actually talks about this. It says that the land beast puts a mark on the right hand and on the forehead of the people who follow. And you've heard about all of that. And can you remember what the mark is? It's 666. In the ancient world, marks should show ownership and allegiance. You belong to the one whose name you bear. The number 6, falling short of 7. So in the Bible, 7 is perfect. In the Bible, 6 is it's not quite perfect. It's corrupted. It's not. It hasn't reached it yet. And now you repeat it 3 times. 6, 6, 6. It means you're definitely not perfect. The number 6 suggests incompletion, brokenness, and counterfeit glory. But Revelation never gives us a counterfeit without showing us the true thing. So immediately after the mark of the beast, John sees a lamb, and he's standing on the Mount of Zion, and with him there are people who have his name and his father's name written on their forehead. And there are, in that sense, 2 marks in Revelation, the mark of the beast, and then there is the seal of God. So as Adventists, we have long understood that the mark of the beast isn't just a physical mark. It's not. You shouldn't. I know it's so tempting. We expect that maybe somebody's going to implant a chip on us, or maybe there's going to be some kind of tattoo that we all need to have. You know what? As Adventists, we have always taught that it is just a sign of who we are loyal to. Who do we worship? Who do we see as our owner? Who do we look at for our character? And so our forehead points to conviction. It points to our mind and towards our inward allegiance. The hand points towards the action that we take. Are we people who live our lives according to our conscience, or do we just have ways that contradict with each other? And so what is the mark of the corresponding mark for Christ's followers? Okay, so it is the name of the Lamb and the Father upon our forehead. It is the seal of belonging. It's God's character impressed upon our lives. It is the commandment of God written in our hearts. It is the faithfulness of Jesus reproduced in his people. 2 more things that I just want to focus on, then I think I'll finish quite quickly. I'm just looking at that image. It's a complicated image to see there, but it talks about how do we know the people of God? And there's 2 things that measure them. The one is the fact that they are commandment-keeping people. And for us as Adventists, when we think about commandments, which commandment comes up first? If we want to keep the Sabbath, okay? Because Sabbath is precious for us. It is against the world. The beast actually offers the opposite of Sabbath. It offers no rest. It offers no peace. It tells us that we are not enough. But the Creator gives us the Sabbath as a sign that we belong to him. So that is the one thing. But one thing else about the commandments of God is that how many commandments are there in the Bible? 10? Are you sure? One of my favorite preachers who talks about Revelation, her name is Kendra Haloviak. She recently preached a sermon. She says, yes, there's 10 commandments, but actually Jesus in the book of John comes and he says, a new commandment I give to you. So what does that mean? If Jesus gives a commandment, then we've got 10 and we've got a new commandment. Is that the 11th commandment? Or is it a commandment that captures the 10 in a way? But it is it's complicated. The Old Testament always talks about the old covenant that will be made new in our heart. And if that new covenant is made new in our heart, what do we get? We get love. We get God's love. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. So how do we know? So let me show you this one. So the Ten Commandments shows loyalty towards God, Sabbath, truthfulness, purity. But this new commandment that Jesus gives says, love one another as I have loved you. And so to me, there's actually a vision of the future of what God really wants in us. God, communities that actually love as Jesus loved. So if we want to know if we're God's people, we've been called by God's people, we are communities that really love one another, and we need to live that out in our lives for where we can be. Okay, let's just, I'm going to try to finish because I'm going on a bit long. Let's just talk about the testimony of Jesus. So we've got the commandments of God, and at the heart of the commandment is our love. But what is the testimony of Jesus? First of all, it is us recognizing that Jesus sets the standard for how we live. When we talk about Jesus, it reveals a God who would rather bear violence than use violence to secure our allegiance. The Lamb conquers not by devouring his enemies, but by being slain. The world, on the other hand, the beast, portrays God as a tyrant, and he suggests that the universe is governed by coercion, economic pleasure, fear, and force. And so we've got the beast on the one side, which is force, but what do we as Christians have to do? We show the people the character of what God is in our lives. One last thing I want to focus on, and then I think I'm finished. The tools of the dragon. The dragon uses sarcasm, the dragon mocks, the dragon bullies, manipulates. The dragon has vengeance and is full of contempt of people. If you look at the culture that we're in, where do you see that today? You see it absolutely everywhere. Everybody is mocking everyone. I was almost at the point of mocking Keir Starmer a bit earlier. That would make me the dragon if I did do that, because that's the way that the world works. But how does Jesus work? The Lamb. The Lamb tells the truth when it's easier to lie. The Lamb treats the awkward neighbor with dignity. The neighbor is full of endurance, even if things get difficult, and self-giving love. And the Lamb's tools is trusting the way of the Lamb, even when it feels weaker in the moment. And so the question I wanted to ask, and I use that word, the Tuesday morning reality, because I know you'll be on a high from church on Sunday and on Monday, but when you get Tuesday, when you're at work and things are getting tough, what kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to live the life that follows the principles of the beast, or do you want to live the life that follows the principles of the Lamb for where we can be? So that is, and I want to give you a preview of coming attractions. If you come next week, and for some reason it doesn't look quite nice on that screen, but next time when I preach, Revelation 14, I want to, because you've got these three beasts, the counterfeit Trinity in chapter 12 and 13. But next time when I come, I'm going to talk to you about the three angels. Okay? And the three angels are going to share a message to the world that is so different from the message of the beast. The beast preaches fear, coercion, and compromise. But Revelation 14, the three angels, they preach an everlasting gospel with an urgent counter message, and we will listen more to them when we get into next week. So, but let me try to summarize and then we'll finish. What does these two chapters say to us? I think it says we shouldn't be naive because our world is full of evil. There is a dragon behind all our confusion. It says we shouldn't believe the accuser because he has been thrown down. It says that we shouldn't be dazzled by power because everything looks lamb-like, speaks that Not everything that looks lamb-like speaks for the Lamb. It says, do not surrender your conscience for comfort, safety, or acceptance. It says, do not confuse beastly coercion with the kingdom of Christ. And it says, remember whose name we bear. So that is what I think we're listening for today. If you belong to Jesus, then even now his name is written on you. If you trust him, if you keep his commandments, if you cling to his testimony, then you already bear the sign of a different kingdom. The world may not see it, but the kingdom of heaven will. So don't be afraid, because the dragon is angry, but he is defeated. The beasts are loud and they are counterfeit. The accuser still shouts, but he has already been thrown down. The Lamb has already conquered, and because of that we can overcome through the blood of the Lamb. So deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome one day. Amen.